I got to the FBI Academy, nothing was going to stop me from succeeding at that
Right.
point. Nothing. And some of the academics were challenging, but for me, I found that once you got there, the FBI was so invested in having you succeed that as long as you focused yourself in each of the areas, you were going to be fine.
Hi, I'm Deirdre Breckenridge. I've spent my entire career helping women to get unstuck, to share their stories, nurture relationships, and to grow their brands. But most of all, to find their voices so they can make a difference. Women Worldwide features the stories of passionate women and the ups and downs of their journeys. With deep insight and advice, let Women Worldwide ignite your passion so you can excel in life. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Women Worldwide. Thank you so much for showing up and being with us every single week. Before I get to today's show and special guest, a couple of Women Worldwide updates. The first is that this show is our 250th episode. I can't even believe it. So we're in our fifth year and we're celebrating our anniversary. And now we have this 250th guest milestone. So thank you to all of you, because this would not have happened without this amazing network. And thanks to all of the guests who come on the show and share their journeys. And most of all, thanks to my team. The Women Worldwide team keeps this ship going. And if it wasn't for them, I don't know how many episodes I could have recorded, but it would not be 250. Now, the other update I'd like to give is that we're in the holiday season. So happy holidays to everybody. May you have a peaceful and joyous season. And Women Worldwide is going on holiday break. So we are excited to kind of step back and relax and rejuvenate. So we won't be publishing shows right after Christmas, so the Friday after Christmas or the Friday after New Year's Day. But we're going to be back better and stronger than ever, publishing our first show in 2020 on Friday, January 10th. Okay, let's get to the show and today's special guest. What's really great about Women Worldwide is that we often have women with really interesting careers that come on the show. And I know you and I too love when we get a woman who is in a field that's dominated by men. So of course we've had women in engineering, in technology. We even had a female astrophysicist who worked with NASA, and we've had women in politics. And today we have a woman who is in law enforcement and intelligence. So joining me on the show is Lauren Anderson. Now, Lauren was in the FBI, and now she has her own consulting firm that focuses on geopolitics. She has a really strong background and expertise in high-risk domestic and international situations. Now, Lauren is also deeply committed to working with women and youth internationally so that she can help to prevent conflict, advocate for social justice, and really address some of the economic disparities in the world today. There's a lot that I could say about Lauren, but I think it's best she shares her journey with you. Lauren, it's great to have you on my show. Welcome.
Thank you, Deirdre. It's great to be here, and I appreciate your inviting me.
Oh my gosh. And I'm so happy you're my 250th guest. That's amazing.
I'm honored.
Awesome. Well, I want to get right to your story. So, of course, please tell us, how did you get to the FBI? I mean, were you the child who said, Mom, Dad, I'm going to be in the FBI someday?
Actually, I wasn't that child, but I was the child that my brothers jokingly called the ambulance chaser, because anytime something was going on, I had to go see what it was all about. But I would say, in terms of my interest in the FBI, the seeds were always there. When I look back and consider myself as a child, the television shows I was interested in, the books that I read, all of that was in the space of crime and espionage and international intrigue. And when I was 11, this was a pivotal moment for me. We traveled to Washington, D.C., and we did all the tours of the various buildings. And at that time, the one that I was most interested in was the tour of FBI headquarters. And I just couldn't wait. And so we begin the tour, and I was absolutely fascinated with everything that I was seeing and everything that I was hearing. And I just thought, wow, this is so cool. And at one point, I raised my hand and I said to the tour guide, "Can girls be FBI agents?" And he looked down at me and he said, "No."
Oh,
And I said, "Why not?" Because, little side
good for
note,
you.
I
Good
had
for
been
you.
raised to do whatever I wanted to do and told I could do that. So he looked down at me and I looked back up at him and I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Because girls would spend all of their time painting their nails." And I was speechless, speechless. At that point in my home, I knew I could do anything. I had been encouraged to have any career I want, pursue any path that I wanted. So I would say that this moment was the first moment where the outside world intruded and somebody was trying to tell me I couldn't do something, which of course, for those who know me, telling me I can't do something is really just the green light to go
That's
and do it.
right. That's amazing. So did that affect your studies? So when you went to school, were you looking to get into, criminal justice? What kind of studies do you need to get into the FBI?
Actually, you can study anything, but interestingly, it did not put me on that path right away. Instead, I was interested in being a doctor.
Oh,
And I actually find commonality because it's having an impact, it's serving in both careers. But I call that my first failure in life because I went to college as a pre med biology major. And I just, as hard as I was working, I wasn't getting the grades that I needed. I was unhappy. And
says it
that was a
wasn't
big
right
pivot.
for you, that there
It,
was
it,
another calling, clearly.
there was another calling, and it
Yeah.
took me some time to figure it out. But when I did, it started to begin to crystallize. And I thought, God, that would be so incredible. Because for me, having an impact and continually learning and serving were things that were very important to me with whatever I chose as a career.
Absolutely. So, Lauren, once you actually make it to the FBI,
Hmm.
and I suppose you have to go through training and,
Yes.
right, being in a class of cadets or whatever they call them, what was that actually like? And how many women were in your class at the time?
Well, when we started, I was in what was called essentially the second wave of women coming in as FBI agents. And we started with 40 people in the class. 8 were women, which was a very high number at that time, but we
Oh,
lost several of them right away. And overall, at that point in time, based on the numbers that I was given in terms of my test results before I started at the FBI Academy, I was one of about 325 women at that point in time. So it was still a very, very small population. And we go to the FBI Academy and we're FBI agent trainees. And we spent 17 weeks. It's now a longer period of time at the FBI Academy. Roughly, our training was broken into 3 categories. It was academic, so
hmm,
learning the law, learning forensics. It was physical, so a great emphasis on physical fitness as well as self-defense. And then the final third was firearms. And then as we got further into the training, we focused on practical applications of all of those skills in real life situations that were created at the academy.
what was the most challenging? Do you feel like, was the academics part easy? Was the physical part easy? Was that tough?
I would say that if you applied yourself, and I made the decision, if I got to the FBI Academy, nothing was going to stop me from succeeding at that
Right.
point. Nothing. And some of the academics were challenging, but for me, I found that once you got there, the FBI was so invested in having you succeed that as long as you focused yourself in each of the areas, you were going to be fine. I would say that my bigger challenges came from outside of that environment. I was
Right.
confident in my academic skills, confident in my ability to certainly do the physical fitness part. The firearms training was new for me, but
Yeah.
it turned out I was good at that, and women in
Mm.
general are very good at firearms. But it was some of the guys around me that presented some of my biggest challenges because there was a resentment on the part of some,
Mm.
not all, that I was there. And I had one classmate say to me one evening, you know, he got kind of up in my face and he said, you have taken the spot of a man that could have been here. They have lower
Wow.
scores to let you in. Today, he would have been tossed out of the FBI Academy, but you're talking 35 years ago.
Where you can
And
get away with saying something like that.
yep. And I looked at him. He was a Vietnam veteran and a pilot. And I said, let me tell you something. I said, I have every right to be here, first of all. And second of all, my scores were high enough to get me in as a white male, which was, the toughest category, if you will.
Right.
So I would appreciate it if you would just zip it up and let's move on. So that was one experience. I had another experience when two classmates complained to one of our class counselors, and they said I was too competitive.
Oh,
And the advisor said, is that a problem? Is she doing something to be overly competitive with you? Well, no, she's just too competitive. And so again, he said, what's the issue?
yeah. Well,
She wants to succeed.
I don't think they would say that about a man.
No, it's safe to say that would never be said about a man. But
Now,
so I would say those small external things, and that was just noise to me. It
sure,
didn't, it bothered me, but it's not something that I dwelled on.
it didn't stop you,
No,
clearly.
no.
Now, when you got out in the field as an agent,
Hmm.
were there any situations where you really had to show your strength as a woman, as a leader, so that your male counterparts would say, "Oh, okay, she's excelling," or not that you had to prove anything, but do any situations stand out?
Yeah, and you actually do have to prove something. Women always have to prove something. But I will say that certainly focusing on the competence, doing my job, paying attention, learning from everybody was critically important. But it was a great moment in my early days of my career because I recognized intuitively, although no one said this to me, that women had different ways of dealing with situations, particularly with conflict or where there was a potential for violence. Women will intuitively find a way to minimize that risk. And there was one situation when I was out on an arrest with a team of people. It was a major narcotics organized crime investigation. And I had just gotten on the SWAT team. And the man I was partnered with, the fellow agent, was giving me a difficult time and saying, okay, Miss SWAT, you can kick in the door. I said, I'm not going to have to kick in the door. And I just got a lot of eye rolling in response to that. So ultimately, when we got the order to execute and go in, I walked up to the door of this woman, and we were six of us, everybody with guns, FBI agents, sheriff's deputies, police department. And I simply knocked on the door, and she came to the door and she didn't open it. And she said, yes. And I said, hey, Gail, my name's Debbie. I live upstairs from you, and I got your mail by mistake. So what did she do? Of
She
course, she
opened the
opened the
door.
door.
Of course.
So now when we went in, it was very dicey because there was three other men. She had been trafficking in cocaine. So there's three men in there pointing guns at all of us. So it was a gun to gun moment, and the first time 6 months out of the FBI Academy that I was looking at the other end of a gun. So it was challenging, but I never hesitated for a minute, and I just, some instinctual part of me realized there was a way to get through that door without kicking it in.
What good instincts. I mean, talk about trusting your gut and not feeling like you have to do it a different way because there's men standing around you. That's amazing.
It
What a
was,
great story. Thank you for
oh, thanks.
sharing that.
Thanks. It was one of those moments that, this many years later, you never forget because it has such an impact as a teaching moment for me as well.
Absolutely. Were there certain skills? So, I mean, definitely the instincts, but were there other skills that you had to learn in the FBI or that helped you to get through some of these situations, which were really intense?
Well, certainly, yes. We are trained, so we have to know the law. We spend a lot of time focusing on how to develop your judgment in a situation and to evaluate everything, not just the words coming out of someone's mouth, but everything around you to determine what your next best steps are going to be. So there's a lot of developmental work that goes on with that, not only in the academy, but throughout your career. In fact, it's a constant learning experience as an FBI agent. If you stop learning at some point in time, you're not going to be nearly as effective as you could be. So in terms of skills, I would say also developing your interpersonal skills and learning as much as you can about other people. To this day, I don't um, do a podcast, have a phone call, go to a meeting without doing my own research about the people or person that I'm going to be engaging with. And that's just not, some of it comes when you're in the FBI from a defensive posture so that you and
Sure.
everyone can be safe. But in reality, any of us will be much more effective in what we're doing in our daily life if we learn as much as we can, and if we observe, if we're not the one constantly talking, if we sit back and we listen and we watch. Sometimes those moments, those situations provide far more information and can inform the decisions we make as leaders than we might otherwise if we were the one talking.
Well, doing your homework is so smart. And I can tell you are a good listener. I just have a feeling.
Thank you.
So, Lauren, I'm going to ask you to hold your thoughts just for a moment.
Mhm.
I want to shift our focus because I'd like to talk about emotional intelligence and leadership. And as you may know, because I think we've discussed this in previous conversations, I embarked on a year-long research project. I call it my Millennial Passion Project. And to find out through my one-on-one interviews with millennials that they feel leaders, especially on social media, are lacking the care, the understanding, the compassion, really the empathy that's necessary to have a true relationship. And my team and I, we built an online test so that all business professionals can test how they feel, which stands for face your fears or be more open and inclusive, engage with empathy, that's the empathy part,
Mhm.
use ethics and good judgment, and unleash the love. And before I give the where to go for the test, I just want to ask you a question.
Sure.
How can leaders be more empathetic in situations, and maybe like what steps can they take to do this?
Well, first of all, I'm delighted that you're doing something like this and listening to
Thank
the
you.
millennials. We could all learn from that and from them. But it's absolutely critical because if you don't make an effort to understand how someone else feels or consider how you would feel to be on the receiving end of what you're saying to somebody, then we're never going to be as effective as we can be as leaders. In the career that I had for much of my adult life, it was surrounded and it was focused on being tough and being in charge and being the person who could take somebody's liberty and life away, which, believe me, is the most powerful thing on the planet. And the trust that people had in me was extraordinary, and not abusing that power is important. But I think equally important is that emotional component of it and that compassion. If I can share one quick
Sure.
situation with you that I think beautifully illustrates this. There was a situation where we arrested an individual for what we would call a white collar crime thing, writing bad checks. So violation of the law, but nothing in terms of what we see some people do. And as we dropped this person off at the jail, we were getting to leave, ready to leave, my partner and I, and this individual we arrested called me back. And my partner was basically like, "Oh, ignore him. Come on, we have to get going," in more colorful language than that. So I turned and, mouthed some colorful language back. And I turned back to the man we had arrested and I said, "What do you need? How can I help you?" And he said, "I'm really cold. Would it be possible to get a blanket?" I said, "Of course it will." So I went to the sheriff's deputy who was running the jail and I said, "He's cold. Would you please bring him a blanket?" He said, "Sure, no problem." And I waited until I saw that sheriff's deputy bring the blanket and hand it to the man in the cell. It was a tiny moment. And about 6 months later, I'm standing in the elevator at the federal building, crowded with people. And a man looks at me and he says, "Hi, how are you doing?" And I look at him. He said, "You don't remember me?" And I said, "I'm sorry, I don't." He said, "Well, you arrested me." And it's one of those moments you're like,
Uh-oh.
"Okay, how are you?" um, but he said this to me. He said, "It was the worst day of my life, but you treated me with such dignity and compassion that I'll never
Oh,
forget you for that." And it
that's
was all
awesome.
about that blanket.
Compassion, kindness,
Yes.
human.
Yep. They are not, antithetical to one another. They have to go hand in hand if you're going to be an effective leader. They must go hand in hand to be an effective leader.
Absolutely Thank you so much for sharing that story. And to everybody who is listening or watching Women Worldwide, you can now take a test to see how much you feel, right? Feel first in your communications. So face fears, engage with empathy, use ethics and your good judgment, and unleash your love or your passion by going to feelfirsttest.com. This test, there's 4 parts, 8 questions in each part. So yes, 32 questions. Sounds like a lot, goes very quickly, but ultimately it's going to score you in each part to see how well you do. And if you score low in any area, the test actually recommends exercises so that you can feel more, because we need more feel to balance out all of the other, the strength, the knowledge, the intelligence, and what leaders have. We need that EQ component. So, Lauren, thank you so much for answering the question.
My
And
pleasure.
let's dive back into our discussion. So, we talked about you getting into the FBI, what it was like to go through the training. You shared a story when you were actually in. And then somewhere along the line, you made a pivot to start your own consulting firm. So maybe do you want to share a little bit about that and why you're doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the telling of that, there's another important point in terms of suggestions that I have for fellow leaders, and that is this: we often stay in our own lane, in our own sector, and too many of us rarely go outside of it. And so, what I'm doing today, and my focus today, is completely a result of a leadership program that I applied for competitively with the International Women's Forum through their Leadership Foundation. And that put me for the first time in a group of all women, number one, and number two, with no one who understood my world, the world that I was living in on a daily basis. And initially, I thought, I don't know about this. And it turned out to be an extraordinary experience. It exploded my world open in a way that I couldn't have imagined prior to beginning that program. And it completely informed what I do today. I took that year that included time at Harvard Business School and the Judge Business School in Cambridge in England. And I took that time and the resources that I had with my fellow classmates and with all of those around us who were providing the instruction and guidance to figure out what I wanted to do next. And too few of us, whether we're in the FBI or whether we're in business, take the time to really consider, what does that next step look like? What do I want it to look like? And I think it's critical that we spend some time on that, and we focus on ourselves and understanding ourselves and where we want to go next. And so that experience was pivotal for me. First, it showed me in such a brilliant way that getting outside my own network, my own lane, and expanding well beyond to women, not just in the United States, but around the world. There was only 10 out of 27 women in this class born in the US.
Wow.
So they were from Africa, Asia, the Middle East, Europe. And what I saw in that environment is that for as much as we may think that we come from different cultures and different careers and different religions, at the core, we are really all the same. And that might sound trite to some people, but it's the reality. And I saw the incredible richness that my life got, and I got personally, from engaging with so many different people who represented so many different cultures and businesses. And it was so helpful to me because they looked at me differently than I looked at myself. And they made suggestions and
They
gave me
saw things in
ideas.
you,
Yep,
right?
that I would have never done. And so I'm grateful for that and that pivot, along with some tremendous women mentors that I had through that organization, were critical in helping me refine what I wanted to do today. And that really came down to this: I wanted to continue to have an impact. I wanted to take the skills and the expertise that I had globally and use it in a way and share it in such a way that would support others and encourage others to pursue their best route, whether that's a tech entrepreneur in Gaza, whether it's an OBGYN in Somalia, whether it's a businesswoman in India. It doesn't matter. I just wanted to say, I want to take the skills that I have and work with people and share and create things so that it's a much better place, and that people are getting to the best point that they can be at. Because honestly, I didn't have that earlier in my career. I didn't have mentors. I didn't have people who were looking to give me that hand up for the most part, not always. And so to me, how can I give that hand up to anybody else, be it a man, a woman, a boy, or a girl? It doesn't matter. What can I share? How can I support you in whatever you want to do?
What this speaks to is you helping people to make a difference, but at
Mhm.
the same time, feeling like you're making a difference. And that's just so gratifying. What I find very interesting is something that you said about taking the time to
Mhm.
step back and getting that
Mhm.
perspective.
Yep.
You know, you find that, do you remember the book, What Color is Your Parachute?
Oh, very well. Because I went
Right?
out and got the latest version when I was leaving the FBI.
I see that. Well, most people focus so much on the start of their journey, and
Mhm.
then sometimes you just kind of let that fall wherever it goes.
Mhm.
And that should be all the time, to make sure that you're expanding and going down the right path, and making sure that you're fulfilling your purpose and your gifts, and helping others, which is what you're doing. So that is amazing. Now, resources. You mentioned something about resources.
Mhm.
And I just wonder, what resources do you use, or what feeds you information so that you can stay on top of your game and so knowledgeable about all the people you're serving and the things that you're doing?
Well, I would say the biggest thing is I look for news outside the United States. For good or for bad, the majority of the focus of the media in this country, whether it's digital, television, radio, print, is on what's happening in the US. And while that makes sense to a great degree, it does so at the point of ignoring the rest of the world. So I seek and get subscriptions to digital media and other media outlets around the world, so that not only do I have a perspective of what's going on in that part of the world, but I begin to understand what their perspective is on not only what's happening in their area, but what's happening in the United States.
Interesting.
And that, combined with living outside the United States, really caused me to think differently about who I am as an American, how we sit in the world, and
Right.
how important it is to look at those other perspectives. So there are certain compendia that I use. Quartz is one of them. They do
Oh,
a
yes. Quartz is a technology app.
they do what they do a tremendous amount of work geographically. So, for
Yeah.
example, I subscribe to Quartz Africa, which I get weekly, which tells me things that are going on across all sectors in Africa, which is an area
Excellent.
that I focus on. So that's
I
one
didn't realize
example.
you could focus on a certain region with quartz.
Yes, you can.
Wow. Okay, that's really good to know.
So it's fabulous. And Chatham House, which is based in the UK, also does tremendous work. And again, these are across different policy areas. My focus is largely national security, international security, but it's across all areas and it's objective. And that to me is critical in the world where we're being bombarded with so much information. Is where's the truth, and how do you find the truth? And so I particularly seek outlets that are trusted and well regarded and report factual information without a whole lot of opinion.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, sometimes I even notice the difference between local news, which is straight
Yeah.
reporting, versus what you see on the cable stations. I can go from
Hmm.
station to station and see all the different angles and what the agenda is behind them.
Yeah.
So it's nice to just be able to get facts, and some objectivity, which a lot of people would say is really lacking in the news today.
It is. And there are certain other apps that I use because I have such an international group of colleagues and friends.
Yeah,
Slack is one that we use. And of
good.
course, WhatsApp. I'm not trying to plug individual apps. I'm
No,
just
but it's
saying that,
great that you mention these tools. And I do want to plug one, Smart News, because
uh,
it's very interesting. Smart News will give me the news that it knows that I like, but it
mhm,
will give me the opposite perspective from
yep.
outlets that I would not necessarily look at, to just give you a balance, because otherwise we're in an echo chamber.
Well, and that's critical. And that's something that I do all the time.
Yep.
I obviously have personal opinions, but I always seek to understand the other side. And I will spend as much time on outlets, as you just shared, with an
Yeah, me
opposing
too.
view than others. There is one other one I'd like to give a plug
Oh,
to. It's called
great.
Women's E-News. Are you
Oh, I
familiar
don't
with
know
them?
this one. Women's
Women's
e-news?
E-News.
Cool.
They're fabulous. They're based here in New York, although they have locations around the world. And they not only serve as a means of pulling together news about women around the world, but they self create original content as well.
Huh.
And they have a subset of that called Teen Voices, which gives girls and
Oh, I
young
love it.
women the opportunity to share their views, to talk about things going on in their lives. And it is produced globally. They actually have a hub in the region of the Gulf. So they have an Arabic version that they produce. And I find it fantastic. It's a great source of looking at news for, about, and by women, covering all parts of the political spectrum. But I also love the piece of the teen voices.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good because that's when the voices need to come out at
Yes.
an earlier age. They often come out later,
Yep.
but teen voices. I'm going to look into this. You said it's women's e.
Women's E-News, a little
Okay.
e, capital News. And they're
Yes.
fantastic because we need to be giving voices to young people, whether it's girls, whether it's boys. I think after the horrible shooting at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School,
Oh,
one of the
terrible.
finest things that came out of that was the students
Yes.
sharing their views and putting their voices out there. And for some of them, making themselves vulnerable and being uncomfortable to convey their thoughts. And I think that that is so important.
I do too. What courage. I mean, it's really
Yeah.
brave for them to stand up and to stand
Extraordinary
out that
courage.
way. Lauren, you're not going to believe it, but we're at the advice question.
Ah,
This segment flew by. So just maybe give us your best advice for women who might be in tough or challenging careers or careers that are underrepresented by them. What would you say to them?
okay, I have a couple of things. First, know yourself. We touched on this earlier. I think too often we plow through life, we go through our careers and our daily lives, and we don't really stop to consider who we are and what parts of what we're doing make us happy and we're good at, and what parts make us less happy and perhaps aren't playing to our best skills. So I think knowing yourself is critical. I think having a sense of humor is important. And if you don't have one, develop it,
Yes.
because humor diffuses so much,
Hmm.
so much. You know, as a young agent, being raised around boys and a dad who told me I could do anything, my ability to give it right back and laugh at something had a huge positive impact on the environment that I was in. And we're not really good at that. And women, I think, are even less good at that than men. And so develop a sense of humor. And the other thing is know what your strengths are and surround yourselves with people who balance what your strengths are in areas that you might not like as much or that perhaps aren't your strong suit, and create a team that's going to support you in such a way that your strengths can shine, their strengths can shine. And then the final thing that I would say is look for allies among women and men. When we talk about women supporting women, that's critical. And we need to get away from the mean girls, which we are, supporting each other. But the other thing that I have found and I have been blessed to have in my life is male allies. And we need to find those men because they are there. They are there. They are willing to support us.
Well,
They're
there's
willing to
many that
give.
want to help. You're
It's
right.
huge.
Yep.
There's a guy that I know who's in his early 30s. I met him at a wedding in Greece. Classic story, right? A big fat wedding in Greece. He turns out to be not only a great friend at this point, but he gives me such a different perspective on things to consider about, have you tried this? Or why don't you think about considering doing that? And there he is, you know, a 30-something-year-old Greek lawyer who just got an MBA, and he's giving me some fabulous advice and making introductions. And we never have a moment where we're nonstop talking when we're together.
That's great.
Yeah.
You just gave such powerful advice. Know yourself, develop a sense of humor, know your strengths, and look for allies. Listeners, apply all of this advice. It's really good. Lauren, last question, super easy. Where can people find out more about you and your work?
First of all, in addition to this podcast, which I'm grateful for the opportunity, Deirdre, I have done other podcasts with Forbes, Mentoring Moments. There's a wonderful former colleague called Jerry Williams who has FBI retired case file reviews.
Nice.
She does some great work. and also through several of the organizations I'm associated with. I am a fellow at the Geneva Center for Security Policy, which is based in Switzerland. Tremendous amount to be found there. Also through Vital Voices, which I've done a lot of work with over the last 6 years. They have several programs, including their Global Ambassadors program. And it's not a highlight of me so much as a highlight of the work that I'm involved with and that I love to do. And I strongly encourage everyone to check out those organizations as well as several others, which can be found also through my social media platforms with LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Oh, you know what? What's your Twitter handle?
Ah, it's at LC Anderson, INTL,
Good. Okay, so everybody can connect with you on Twitter and find you on LinkedIn.
which I would
Thank you
love.
so much for
Thank
sharing your
you.
journey, a lot of actionable advice, and what it was like to be a woman in the FBI and intelligence. You are an inspiration. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you, Deirdre. I appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. And thank you to all of you for tuning into the show and for sharing the episodes with our amazing guests like Lauren. And please keep the feedback coming. You can always tweet me. I'm at Dee Breckenridge, or tweet Women Worldwide. Subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you can watch the shows. And don't forget, we're going to go on holiday break, and we will see you, and you'll be able to get your episode in the new year on January 10th. Okay, friends, until our next episode, you know what I always say: stay focused, energized, and feeling empowered. Thank you.